So just as you said, urban sketching is such a source of joy for all of us who practice, who draw. But can we also use it to make our world a better place, to bring about social change, to bring attention to history, to marginalized communities? And I'm very lucky to speak on this topic and talk about my little projects, but Urban Sketchers is one of the most amazing, generous communities that I've ever belonged to. From local admins who organize all of our sketch scrolls, to the board, who many of whom served for many years, to our amazing instructors who volunteer their time to teach at symposiums. And there, of course, the community grant workshop program that Mike will be talking about later. I want to do a shout out to USK Paris. They've been doing some amazing volunteer projects with different communities like kids from poor families, prisoners. So there's just so much goodness everywhere. And once again, it's I feel lucky to belong to this community and to speak on this subject.
Yeah, I absolutely hear you. I mean, I think just looking through the feed and talking to urban sketchers on social media every day, that is my highlight. And that really makes my day. It lifts me up when I'm not feeling good, and I'm sure a lot of you feel that as well. So, Rita, how do you think that urban sketching like this can bring about positive change?
So what I wanted to talk about specifically is how our drawings themselves can be a source of good in the world. And there are many ways to do it, and many ways to kind of, you just have to turn your mind in that direction. And what we do as artists, as sketchers, is very visible because drawing is so unique. It's a difficult skill to master. So what we do earns a lot of respect, earns a lot of attention just by the very nature of what it is. Now, urban sketchers in particular are witnesses because we draw what we see from our observation. So when people see that we're in a place on a street corner for many hours, or we're interviewing or talking to a subject, they know that this is not something that we made up in our imagination or that it promotes a certain type of view. It's what we witnessed. So what we do has a lot of power. And
Yeah,
just go ahead.
Go ahead, please. Yeah, no, I was just about to say
Just
that.
to,
Yeah, we have a very important voice in the community,
yes.
in the world today.
Yeah.
But
And so
yes,
just
please.
one example that comes to mind that I think everybody still has pretty fresh because we're living it right now is the grassroots USK at Home campaign. So in the first, if you remember, in the first days of the pandemic, people started sketching their kitchens, their cats, their family members.
Right.
All of a sudden, we went from sketching busy urban centers into drawing our internal world and tagging it with USK at Home. So in a way, you can argue that this was the public health awareness campaign because for those of us who weren't very quick to understand that there was a huge danger and something was different changing in the world, this kind of was a huge clue that pay attention. So even if our governments weren't paying attention, our sketchers from other parts of the world were telling us, watch out.
Yeah, keep an eye out. Things are happening. Okay,
Yes.
so I really want to talk to you about the examples that you have about how you've used your voice as an urban sketcher as a megaphone. And I really like that catchphrase as well, a megaphone, a very powerful one too. So let's dive right into it. What are you going to share with us today? What stories? What powerful stories?
All right. Well, one project that is, once again, has a lot of relevance to what we're living right now. And that is a project that I did in, I think, 2017, 18, so a couple of years ago. And that's the story of Kalaupapa Settlement. So for those who don't know, this was 100-year-long quarantine on the island of Molokai. And in a way, it still continues because there's still a handful of patients living there. But people with Hansen's disease, commonly known as leprosy, were sent here sometimes by mistake. They were suspected of having the disease, so they were sent here in isolation. And the isolation was created by the nature itself because there are no roads that lead to this place. It's very, very difficult to get here. So initially they were kind of left to fend for themselves. Eventually some structures were built. So we're looking at the community kitchen with that big chimney. And the structure to the left is a housing for the severely blind and the infirm. So patients lived there, and they had their community kitchen. They had some activities. Yeah, it's a very, very special place. And I know that we're all getting a little tired of the quarantine. It's been going on for a few months. But talk about a really long quarantine of 100 years.
Wow.
So right now, the Kalaupapa is managed by the national park. And what they're trying to do, in addition to kind of preserve the heritage of that place, is to restore the native plants, vegetation of the island, because it's also been severely affected by all the invasive species. So there are a lot of volunteers working on replanting native plants.
That's it. I mean, your work is really stunning, and you've brought such beauty. I mean, this is some people don't. I don't know whether you caught it. This is in Hawaii, and you think of it as like a holiday destination. And the way that you sensitively brought out the beauty of the place and paired that with the story, it's really quite stunning, Rita. Thank you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
please go on. Tell us more.
So this is one of the areas, a coastal vegetation restoration area. So this area is completely closed off. You can't go there, unfortunately. But if you could witness the amazing comeback of the native plants when they're kind of cared for, and this is a process where they come back because they take away the invasive species animals that eat them up. So these plants are coming back, and it's just this amazing symphony of color and beautiful, hopefully almost original vegetation.
Can you tell us like how you came to go to this place? How did you know about it, and how did you arrange to go there and document this place?
Yes, so this is something that I heard. My mom had a chance to visit this place, I think in the 90s, and she came back and she told us about it, and it just captured my imagination that there's this place that's completely cut off from the world by this highest sea cliffs in the world.
Wow.
And there's a community of patients with Hansen's disease who live there. And I always had this in the back of my mind, always wanted to go and witness this place for myself. And as years went by, I actually met someone who works for the park. And so there was a lot of arranging and it's difficult to go there. Yes.
Yeah, I
It
can
worked
imagine.
out.
And for those of you who are not aware of it, go to Rita's IG page. Her Instagram account has got a little video on her. I'm just going to put up Rita's Instagram later as well, so you can take a shot. Go there. She's got a little video that you should watch to give you an idea how beautiful this place is, how remote it is. Thank you for posting that. I just saw the video. It was stunning, stunning.
Yeah.
Okay,
And so
so
I see a quick question about the patients. Everybody always asks this.
you
The
break
disease was
tiny bit.
yes, you did
Those of
too.
you find Yeah, okay, so we both broke up just a tiny bit. Yeah, but we're back. We're back. So for those of you who've just joined us, we're on USkTalks. We're talking to Rita Sabler, our USK Education Director, and she's talking about how we can do use urban sketching for good. She's telling us about this project she did in Hawaii, in Kalaupapa, please, Rita, continue and tell us about this. This is truly fascinating, and it is not just any collection of shoes to our viewers. Take it away, Rita. Tell us.
So these are shoes from former patients. The disease affects your feet, so they kind of had to rig their own footwear um, to fit to fit them better, to make them more comfortable. And so this was very special. These people are gone, but their footwear remains sort of as a reminder of them. And each shoe kind of tells a story
Tell us
of
about
their.
these casts. Yeah.
Yeah, so eventually, as the kind of care improved overall for the patients, they sent a specialist who was able to create molds of their feet. So these are actual
Hmm.
molds of the actual patients and create footwear that would fit them better.
Wow. Okay.
But everything is
That's
very, very rudimentary there because, like I said, there's not a lot of ways to bring supplies. So everything is kind of recycled and redone from what they have. All the building
hmm
materials are usually taken from the existing structures and they just rebuild things from
Wow.
those.
And repurpose and adapt. Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's so touching. It's really moving looking at all this. And I assume that this is part of their transportation system.
So this was an inventive company. One of the patients created a company to do little tours around the settlement for tourists, and he used an old fleet of buses. And since there's no auto mechanic or anything like that, when they break, he would fix them. Sometimes literally with just banana leaves and glue
Duct
and
tape.
things like that. Duct tape, exactly. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing. That is amazing. Yeah. Going on.
Yeah, and
Yeah. And you've got such
this is the
wonderful sketches.
thank you. And this is the original church that Father Damien built. Those in Belgium probably know about Father Damien. He went there to work with his patients. He's done amazing things for them. Unfortunately, he also contracted the disease and died of it later. And
Oh, that's so sad.
he was initially buried next to this church because that was his Father Damien's church. But
Hmm.
they exhumed him and took his body to back to his native Belgium. But his right hand is still there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
So
so
more
there's,
images.
of course, this is a cemetery, and basically the whole settlement is, I think there are about 3,000 graves and many unmarked graves as well. So it's a lot of what you see are graves, and it's. But I want to emphasize that it's not just kind of the story of death and disease. It's also the story of the strength of human spirit and
Hmm.
perseverance and fight, because these people were isolated. They were left to their own devices, but they also kind of stayed strong. They found ways to find joy in their lives. They
And
had
adapt. Yeah.
and adapt. Yeah, they had a concert hall. They would watch movies. They would play games. This is a typical. This is their post office. So this was kind of their link to the outside world, because a lot of times they were separated from their families when they were brought here.
Okay. That's I'm speechless because I'm also really impressed and amazed at the work that you've done to document it. Because I mean, just this is really like stellar storytelling, stellar visual storytelling. And just looking at the comments, people are fascinated by the history, the story, your skills in telling it as well, and bringing so much heart to the artwork. Okay, and you have more stories for us. So let's jump on to the next one.
All right,
Let's go.
so a very different story here. This
Hmm.
is the story of the famous border wall that's on the southern border of the United States with Mexico. And I started this project just earlier this year, and unfortunately,
Wow.
it's obviously not finished. We all had to come back and shelter in place. But what's really interesting, once again, and the team told me, oh, all of your stories are so sad. The border wall makes me sad. But the wall is just a bunch of steel, right? What's really interesting
Yeah.
to me are the communities that live on both sides of the wall and how there's so much connection. A lot of times it's the same family that is separated by the wall, by the border.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
there's just so much back and forth that's going on because it's the same family sometimes. People from Mexico go through the pedestrian crossing. This is in the town of Nogales in southern Arizona.
Hmm.
They go
Yeah.
through the pedestrian crossing that you can see here in the sketch to shop for
Wow.
milk, for basic things, because produce and basic necessities are cheaper on the US side. So they just walk through with their shopping carts
Hmm.
to go buy their groceries. And businesses on the US side depend very heavily
Hmm.
on the shoppers, on the commerce.
Wow.
So
Wow.
when they fortify the wall, when they build the wall, when they make it harder to cross, those businesses on the US are the ones who
That suffer.
suffer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. And so there's passport control, I assume. It's not just a stroll
Yes,
right through. Yeah,
yes,
passport
yeah.
control, but like, they're just showing like here's my book, and then go get some milk, and then come back.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. So
All
this
right.
is another example of a border, but it's not a wall. It's just only about 20, 30 miles east of where we saw a big wall in Nogales. So a lot of the border wall is actually just this kind of barrier that's mostly designed for vehicles. And this is a very agricultural part of the country, so there's a lot of ranchers and cows and things like that.
Okay. Okay. But I can
Yeah,
see how it's also, I mean, just looking at your sketches, it says the whole story. And it's so descriptive. So there's really
yeah.
all kinds. Go
Yeah,
on,
so this
please.
is another little town, a town of Naco, and it's very much suffered from kind of the situation and the hardening of the border. You can see there's houses that are adjacent to the wall are just so dilapidated, so
Hmm.
in a state of disrepair, and a lot of poverty in that part of the country.
Wow. Okay. All right. Going on. I mean, it's just so much to look at here. It's such a visual
Yeah,
delight.
so this is this is back in the
Yeah.
town of Nogales. So just kind of you see shoppers buying clothes and shopping and there are wonderful stories, of course, as a just because you are on the street drawing, you get to meet really amazing people through that. So
Hmm.
in the town of Nogales, I met this business owner who owns a bridal. He sells wedding dresses
Wow.
on
Okay.
right
Right.
on the
Yeah.
border. His shop is right next to the wall. So I was interviewing him, and I asked him why did his it's a family business. Why did his family choose to put the shop right next to the wall? Because
Hmm.
it has razor wire. It's not very pretty.
Yeah.
And it turns out that back in time before the really toll wall went on with all the razor
Hmm.
wire, it was a great place for business to show off dresses for people on the other side of the
Oh,
border, so
all right.
they could shop
Like
across across the
like
wall.
a teaser fluttering. Hey, check me
Yes,
out.
yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay. Well, that's really good. We've got an excellent question here from Ludi.vc. What mindset do you start with to get and how do you do you hope to get something for yourself or learn something? So, good question.
The mindset. So
Yes.
I'll talk a little bit about that.
Hmm.
Well, maybe I should talk
Okay.
about it right now. Um,
Yeah, I think, yes. I'll do your manual
you
Ken
can,
Burns thing. So yeah,
yeah, you can.
you can explain. You can explain. Yeah.
Yeah. So How do you begin kind of with this way of drawing and telling stories? My advice is number one, look look inside of yourself, explore your passions. So what is it that interests you? Because if you're not passionate about your story, about your subject, there's no way you'll make others interested in it. So no matter how beautiful your drawing is, if you're not invested in it yourself personally, it's not going to work. So number one, explore your passions. Number two, draw
Go. Yeah.
with your heart. So draw, develop this affection and love for your subject. That really
Oh,
helps to tell the story.
that is
Number
so evident
three,
in this piece, I think. Yeah. Okay.
number three,
Um,
keep it simple and keep it small. So start with something that you witness in your own community, and then don't think of big global issues. Think small, and then the story will kind of take you to larger issues.
okay. That
And then,
sounds really good. Go on,
yeah.
please. Yeah, no, go on, please. Yeah. Because I mean, you got one more story that I'd really like to get to, but yeah, it's all relevant. So go on. Do you have more points to expand on that?
The last point is make connections. So think about
Mm,
not just connections with your subject, but think about
mhm.
connections of what community you can serve with your drawings, and
Okay.
how they can help.
How they can help, how they can inspire, how they can bring about change. Really, really excellent advice, which leads us to this story.
Oh yeah,
Kindly tell us what's happening here. Yeah.
so this one is in my native Portland, and it's a story about the older, kind of aging LGBT community in Portland. So these folks
Oh,
were very active in the 60s, fighting for their rights. And now they're in their 70s and 80s, and they're still incredibly social. A lot of times they don't have a lot of visibility. They they're kind of, as aging population, they don't have a lot of representation, and they don't have sometimes don't have family to take care of them. So this was
mhm.
kind of to get to know them and to tell their story and to remind local governments and the society that they're still here with us.
Wow. And did you do an exhibition after that with all these
Yeah, this
panels of
was
work?
this was all part of an exhibit that we did. There were a lot of creatives involved, and
Oh,
um, a, a large LGBTQ community in Portland. And through this
wow.
project, I got to meet the oldest working drag queen in the world. So he's in the he's in the World Book in the Guinness World Book of Records as the oldest drag queen who actually he has his own theater, and he does
Uh,
shows 3 times a week, still in his late
oh,
80s.
that is so inspiring. I love that. Yes,
Hmm.
someone just, oh, Eileen from San Francisco. Yes, thanks for the story highlighting LGBTQIA plus rights. Yes. That's really incredible. And yeah, you've told us about how well you've brought so much to the table. What's your advice for sketchers who want to start documenting something, or like how do you start from zero if you have no clue?
So here's once again, explore your passions.
Yep, all those great bullet points quickly.
Draw with your heart.
Yep, draw with
Think
your heart.
small.
Hmm.
Think
Yes.
small, and
Hmm.
build connections.
Ah, okay.